is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Stout Out Show, your one-stop shop for all things MMA bets, breakdowns, and predictions. All right, we got a good one on the horizon for this weekend, December 6th in Las Vegas in the T-Mobile Arena. It's UFC 323. Murad Bivashvili is defending his bantamweight strap in a rematch against Peter Yan. And in the co-main, we got Alexander Pantoja defending his flyweight belt against fan favorite Joshua Van. But before we get into that, let's hit into the prelims and let's get started. All right, first fight to get things started is going to be Muhammad Naimov taking on Marion Santos in the featherweight division. Naimov is a plus 220 dog, while Marion Santos is a minus 295 favorite. All right, Naimov is 5-1 in the UFC. He's coming off a great KO win against Bogdan Grad, riding a 2-fight winning streak, which is solid. Not to mention he's never been knocked out. Very, very good chin, very durable. For those who don't know, he's a decorated Taekwondo athlete, competed multiple times in the Asian Juniors Championship and placed. So he uses his feet offensively very, very well. Whether it's either looking for that, calf kick or a highlight level, a highlight reel, high kick, definitely look out for those. He also hides behind his straight right, which I really like, and he always looks for those counter left hand hooks. When I was looking at tape, it looks like he kind of fights in momentum waves, kind of, burst fighting, if you will, in and out, very fast combinations. His significant strikes landed is kind of low. I think it's 2 significant strikes landed per minute. But to me, that means, he's not looking like for high output or high volume. He's really decisive in looking at what strikes he wants to land because he's looking for that one shot knockout or that one strike combo. He looks for openings. He can smell blood in the water, and he's really looking to, exploit his opponent's weaknesses. The knock on him is going to, is defensively, he scrambles hard, but his back taking and his choke defense kind of remains under par. His one loss in the UFC is by submission. So again, if he can get taken down, he can by a superior grappler, he can stay on his back a little longer than he wants. Fortunately for him, he's fighting Marion Santos, who I feel like is not going to take it to the ground at all. Marion Santos is a dog. Santos is 3-0 in the UFC. He's coming off a unanimous decision win against Sadiq Yusuff that happened in May of 2025. And, he's riding a 3-fight win streak. For those who haven't seen Santos fight before, that dude has got some power in his hands. He can attack from a very amount of angles, and he's got one-shot knockout power. 8 of his wins total in his record are by KO or TKO. His Sadiq Yusuff fight kind of proves that, although he's always looking for the finish, he can take it all 3 rounds. You know what I mean? He's got the wind. He's got the cardio to, keep it going. He's not kind of fading in the later rounds, His offensive grappling is kind of minimal. He banks more of his striking, which is going to be, kind of good for him in this fight. Muhammad Naimov is not at all taking it to the ground. So I'm going to say it's going to be Marion Santos for the win on this one. I'm going to say it's going to be a round 2 TKO. Santos is going to try to control distance with straight punches and pressure. But again, if Naimov can explode and turn his exchanges into chaos, he kind of makes this fight 50-50. But I just think Marion Santos is a better younger prospect. I think he's got a lot more power in his hands. So I'm going to go with, this is the first time I think Naimov is going to get knocked out. So I'm going to say Naimov TKO round 2. All right. The next fight up we got is Mansour Abdul-Malik taking on Antonio Trocoli in the middleweight division. This is by far should be everybody's lock of the night. This is the odds-on favorite fight. Abdul-Malik is your minus 1,000 favorite, while Trocoli is a plus 560 dog. All right, Abdul-Malik is 3-0-1 in the UFC. He just is coming off a draw against Cody Brundage. He's undefeated, former collegiate wrestler at Maryland. Shout out Terps, by the way. Pretty long reach at 79 inches. And he is looking to finish fights early and often. He's really, really got good hands, really good, really good striking. He shows he can finish fights, like I said, early and capitalize on his opponent's weaknesses when it's seen. He really looks for forward pressure and foot on the gas early and often in the rounds. As far as grappling goes, collegiate wrestling, he's not really. He can do level changes. Don't get me wrong, but I think in Trocoli's department, he's 6'5" with an 80-inch reach, and he's looking to get you to the ground. He's looking to use those limbs. 5 of his 12 wins are by submission. So, but I just don't think he's got the tools to take Malik down at all. There's not a shot of that happening, in my opinion. Uh, you know, his finishes tend to, as far as Malik goes, his finishes tend to come when he jumps on momentum rather than grinding him out minute by minute. But, I just think, Trocoli does not have anything going for him in terms of, the negatives far outweigh the positives, in my opinion. Prime example, all right, he's 0-2-1 in the UFC. He's coming off a submission loss against Tresean Gore. That happened November of last year. He's riding a 2-fight win streak, and both of his losses in the UFC have been finishes. They haven't even gone the distance. And another ad, he's 34, so he's getting to the end of the ride, if you will. And his significant strike volume is one strike, one significant strike per minute. He lands it at 50% accuracy, which I guess is, he's got that going for him. But I just don't think that, he's got even this has to be people's lock of the week. But sure, the X factor for Mansour Abdul-Malik is going to go, obviously his ability to get inside Trocoli's reach without getting tied up in the clinch or looking, taken down to the mat. But, if Abdul-Malik can avoid this, he's going to win the fight pretty quickly. So I'm going to say Abdul-Malik wins this fight, KO, round 1, lights out. Let's go on to the next. All right, next fight is we got in the light heavyweight division, we got Baraniewski taking on Aslan. Baraniewski is a minus 215 favorite, while Aslan is a plus 164 dog. Baraniewski is 1-0 in the UFC. I know people always break my balls about this, but in my opinion, if you fought in the Contender Series, you have fought in the UFC, okay? It's called Dana White's Contender Series. Dana White's president of UFC. Connect the freaking dots, okay? He's 1-0 in the UFC. Baraniewski in the Contender Series had a solid knockout against Muhammad Ali. That happened in September. If you missed it, he connected with this nice right hand and just dropped Ali, which a lot of people weren't. I mean, some people were expecting it, but his background is really in judo and submission grappling. He's 6-0, and all of his wins are by finish. He's got 4 by knockout and then 2 by submission. Extremely high finishing rate for a good prospect. And he can win both ways. He doesn't favor one or the other. He's 6 foot, 73-inch reach for a 73 reach. I know that's not the biggest size for a light heavyweight, but again, against Aslam, I think that's he's got more than what it takes. Aslam, on the other hand, he's 3-2. Yeah, in the UFC, he's coming off a unanimous decision loss to Billy Alekana. That happened in July, and he's riding a 2-fight losing streak. Aslan, on the other hand, he's never been KO'd before, and he's 6'3" with a 77-inch reach. And the dude has got just hands for days, dude. All of his wins, 100% of them are by KO or TKO. He is looking for that one shot to put you out. He is going to send you into hyperspeed, and you are going to sleep, okay? He relies literally on his power and power alone. He definitely shows willingness to engage early and often, stand in the pocket, and looking to put your lights out. The big thing for him, though, again, his losses are by, he has been submitted before, and he had that unanimous decision loss to Alekana. His significant strikes landed are 5, little less accurate with 47%, but he's still, he's putting the pressure on you. In my opinion, I think Baraniewski is going to get this one via submission. I think it's going to happen in round 2. Baraniewski is going to try to implement his grappling game before Aslan lands his one-punch KO power. If Iwo grapples early, then the fight's his to win. But again, if Aslan lands early, it's lights out before the fight even gets going. But I really think Baraniewski is a young prospect on the rise. I think he's got what it takes to really get Aslan in the clinch and do those trip takedowns, those really good judo trips, which I think he's going to stand out. I think he's going to trip him to get him to the ground and get a submission. So I'm going to say round 2 submission by Baraniewski. All right, next up we have Edson Barboza taking on Jalen Turner in the lightweight division. Barboza is your plus 200 underdog, while Jalen Turner is your minus 265 favorite. Okay, Edson Barboza. Everybody knows, and if you don't know, he's got leg kicks for days. He's coming for those calf kicks. He's coming to do those highlight level, wheel kicks. His stand-up is something to be feared. Now, as he's gotten older, has the speed and the power kind of, regressed in the years? Probably. He's riding a 2-fight losing streak. He's just coming off unanimous decision loss, but he has one of the most feared kicking games in all of MMA. That's, undeniable. Really good, pretty good as far as takedowns go. But if you're an elite takedown guy, an elite wrestler, you definitely can take Barboza down and keep him on the mat. We saw this with the Khabib fight. But again, is Jalen Turner that level of wrestler? No, not even close, in my opinion. Not to mention Edson Barboza has been in the UFC for over a decade, dude. There's not a fighter that he has not seen. There is not a level of expertise or a level of guy that he has not fought. He has fought literally everybody in the division. Win, lose, or draw, you're not giving him a look that he hasn't seen. Jalen Turner is obviously going to look to neutralize his legs, going to try to close the distance. But the big thing with Turner, dude, is he's 8-6 in the UFC. He's just coming off a submission loss to Ignacio Bahamondes that happened in March, and he's also riding a 2-fight losing streak. The big question to me is Jalen Turner's head in the game? Is he retired? Is he not retired? Edson Barboza has been in the game, like I said, a decade plus. The dude hasn't even thought about quitting. The most he's ever thought about doing is leaving the UFC for another promotion for more money. But his bread and butter is in MMA fighting. He is not quitting anytime soon. I mean, he should. He's getting older. The ride is definitely coming to an end, but his head is still here. Jalen Turner, again, is he about it? That's yet to be decided. I think the thing for Jalen Turner, what he's got going for him is, one, he's way more athletic than Edson Barboza. He's bigger. He's 6'3" with a 77-inch reach advantage. He's got 10 KO wins with 4 subs. So he can definitely, strike, and, he's got some versatility with striking and submission. But he favors that, explosive striking in the big moments rather than kind of picking you apart. He's not good at methodical striking or just, kind of picking you apart. He's more, okay, I see it. I see an opening. I'm going to capitalize on it. He has 4 losses in his last 5 live fights before he's decided to retire. So is he motivated enough? Like we said, I don't know. In my opinion, the X factor for this fight, this is classic range versus pressure fighting in terms of matchup, and that single variable, that's going to dictate everything. Can Edson Barboza keep Jalen Turner at range with his kicking? And I believe the answer is yes. I think I'm going to choose the underdog in this one. I think Barboza wants it more. I don't think Jalen Turner's head's really in it. I think Barboza's seen way more Jalen Turners than Jalen Turner has seen Edson Barboza's, if that makes sense. So I'm going to say Edson Barboza. He's going to get the unanimous decision win. All right, our next fight is going to be the number 14 ranked Marvin Vettori taking on Bruno Ferreira in the middleweight division. Vettori is Vettori's minus 118, while Ferreira is minus 108. Okay, but Marvin Vettori, he's coming off a 3-fight losing streak. He just lost to Brendan Allen, but the 3-fight losing streak you really got to look at, right? Marvin Vettori is fighting the top guys in the middleweight division. There's definitely a gap between the top, I would say, 6 and up compared to Marvin Vettori. There's an obviously talent gap. Marvin Vettori is not touching the top 6 guys. It's just he's been there. There's a reason why he's fighting in the early prelims. He's been there. It hasn't gone his way. Now there's been things going on in his personal life that could dictate whether that's happened or not. But I'm just going on pure fighting alone, right? The good thing with Marvin Vettori, he's never been KO'd before. His average strikes landed is about 4 significant strikes, but he absorbs a lot of damage too, right? He absorbs about another 4 strikes. His defensive accuracy is pretty good at 56%, but again, like I said, he's getting hit early and often. That's how people steal rounds from him, The dude is a grinder. He's looking to put you on the ground, get in top position, get you against the cage, and do trips and take you to the ground. Looking to grind out that win via ground and pound, He's only got, out of his 19 wins, he's only got 2 KOs. He's only got 9, and then plus another 9 submission wins, It's just Marvin Vettori, he knows his bread and butter. He knows how to win. He knows how to, he's not looking to mix it, at least at this point in his career. He's not looking to mix and match it up. He says, listen, I can take you down. I can do that. I can get you to the ground and keep you there if I want to. That's how I'm winning. Bruno Ferreira, on the other hand, the dude, he's got some stuff, man. He's 6-2 in the UFC. He's coming off a submission win against Jackson McVeigh, which, that's, to me, that's not really saying something. I thought Jackson McVeigh was going to be like this next prospect. That dude, I've lost twice with Jackson McVeigh. It's just it's so frustrating. But that's a whole other video. He's so fucking frustrating. Anyway, Ferreira's riding a 2-fight winning streak. All of his wins are either by KO or TKO or submission. He's a 100% finisher, right? Good versatility, whether it comes to submissions or knockout or TKO. He can do it in both departments. He's not particularly big for the middleweight division. He's only 5'10", so he tends to lean more on his power than his length and his reach. But again, he can overpower opponents with his hands. Like he's looking for forward momentum, and he's capable of ending the fight quickly. Definitely pretty imposing when it comes to physicality. His reach, I don't know if I said this, is 72 inches. But can he go the distance with Marvin Vettori? I think Marvin Vettori's back is against the wall. I think Marvin Vettori is ranked number 14 for a reason. I think he's going to get it done. I think Marvin Vettori can take this fight into deep waters, round 2 and 3, and eke out the decision win against Bruno Ferreira. I'm going to pick Marvin Vettori. I think he's going to get it done. I think his experience is, going to just outweigh Bruno Ferreira. I think he's going to get the, again, pin him against the cage, look for those good trips. So, Marvin Vettori's got to avoid Bruno Ferreira's explosive power and pretty much kind of impose his will. But, again, Ferreira's finish potential, and his momentum, that's going to be hard to overcome. But I'm going to say Marvin Vettori for the win. All right, next up we got Ziam Sadykhov taking on Ziam in the lightweight division. Sadykhov is a plus 114 underdog, while Ziam is the minus 146 favorite. Sadykhov is pretty solid, dude. He's 5-0-1 in the UFC, coming off a good KO win against Nicholas Mota that happened in July of 2025, and he's riding a 2-fight win streak. He's got a really good set of hands on him, man. He can put you to sleep. Super, super, super heavy-handed. Good fight IQ too, man. He definitely knows when to push, when to counter, and when to mix in grappling. He can change levels really, really well. That's what I like about him. Grappling, obviously, is not a strong suit. People who have better cardio or can impose their will by taking him down, that kind of leaves him in a zone that he doesn't want to go into. But, on paperwork, he's fighting Ziam, obviously, and Ziam is pretty much identical in that fact. Ziam doesn't want to take the fight to the ground. Ziam's trying to keep the fight standing as well. Another identical fact between both of them is neither of them have ever been knocked out before. They've both been submitted, but nobody's been KO'd. Anyway, Sadykhov, again, he has yet to fight the top tier of the division, so that's kind of leaving a little bit leeway for, can he hang in with the best of them? But still, though, he's got some heavy hands. I really like his counters and his footwork too. Ziam, on the other hand, he's coming off a unanimous decision win against Mike Davis. He's 7-2 in the UFC. He's riding a nice 5-fight win streak, and he's demonstrated he's really proficient not only in stand-up but kickboxing exclusively. He's good at keeping distance, good at keeping his footwork aloof, and making sure guys, kind of miss and keeping the fight where he wants to dictate it. Good fight geography. If he can keep the fight at range, he's got a better chance of winning. Ziam, in terms of physicality, he's 6'1" with a 75-inch reach advantage. He does have 3 submission losses. Like we said earlier, his opponents can take it to the ground. That's kind of his weak point in his ground game. I think the X factor between these two guys is, like I said, can Ziam keep the fight long distance into a kickboxing match and kind of avoid Sadykhov's, pressure fighting, chaos. I want to get, early storm. That's what he wants to do. Get in early and often and just shut it down within the first round. If Ziam can keep the range and footwork, to his, toward his advantages, I could see him getting the win. I personally think that Sadykhov, I think he's more heavy-handed than Ziam. He's really good at looking for that one-punch, KO. So I'm going to say Sadykhov by TKO round 2. I think he's going to give Ziam his first loss via TKO. So I'm saying Sadykhov TKO. All right, next up, we got the first and only women's fight on the card is number 5, Maycee Barber takes on number 9 ranked Karini Silva in the women's flyweight division. Maycee Barber is a minus 180 favorite, while Karini Silva is a plus 140 underdog. All right, Maycee Barber. Now I'm filming this on Tuesday. The big question is, can Maycee Barber make the walk on Saturday? Maycee Barber hasn't fought in approximately 21 months. We all know what happened when she fought Erin Blanchfield. She had a seizure prior to coming out. That really led to a lot of questions about A, her health, B, her professionalism. If she wasn't good to go, why did you even accept the fight in the first place? But that's neither here nor there. We're here now. Hopefully she can make the walk on Saturday. She struggled early in her career, but before that, she put on a nice little win streak. Man, she's on a 6-fight winning streak. She just got a good unanimous decision win against Caitlin Seminara, but that happened back in March of 2024. She likes to push the pace, likes to pressure opponents, and she likes to take them down in the clinch and really use that ground and pound. 6 of her 14 wins are by TKO and KO. When she's on her game, she is on her game, and there's a reason why she's ranked number 5. She fights switch stance, which I like. Can kind of create striking at different angles. Really surprise her opponents by different ways of attack. And she's got some pretty good, not the heaviest of hands, but she definitely's got some solid, power in her hands. Karine Silva, on the other hand, she's more than active. She's 6-1 in the UFC. She's just coming off a solid unanimous decision win against Diana Barboza that happened in August. She has a long pro history of an MMA career. She's fought in a bunch of regional promotions and not in the UFC particularly. So she's seen a lot of different looks. She's got the experience. I got to give her that. But she's definitely lost, to Vivian Araujo. That was be a unanimous decision. I see a lot of comparisons in Macy's game and Vivian's game. Karine Silva, her striking accuracy and her defense definitely aren't on the level of the elite striker at the elite striking level for the women's flyweight division. That's kind of my knock on her. Can Barber close the distance and turn this into a gritty, heavy pressure fight? I think she can. I think that's her path to victory. Obviously Silva's going to look to keep the distance, and pretty much provide an early storm. But I think if Maycee Barber survives that, she's definitely got the ways to win if she can make the walk in the first place. But I'm saying Maycee Barber, unanimous decision. Welcome back after almost 2 years of being absent, but welcome back, Maycee Barber for the win, unanimous decision. All right, next up, we got Terrence McKinney taking on Chris Duncan in the lightweight division. Terrence McKinney is a plus 136 underdog, while Chris Duncan is a minus 174 favorite. Okay, I'm super all about the Terrence McKinney train. I'm aboard it. I'm all for the hype. I mean, this dude's coming off of a sub-win in June against Vyacheslav Borshev. He's riding a 2-fight win streak, and this is something to be studied, everybody. His 17-7 record is 100% finish rate, right? 16 out of his 17 wins are in the first round, and fights for him do not go to a decision. He's a former collegiate wrestling. He's a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so we know he's got the ground game. You know what I mean? He definitely has the tools to defend his takedowns, and he implements a pretty good submission offense. Significant strikes landed at a good pace. He's got 5 significant strikes landed at a minute. The big knock on him is, listen, against guys who are really, really like the ultra elite strikers, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's kind of been Terrence McKinney's game. If people can kind of find, use his aggressiveness to their advantage, find openings and really create chaos in the fact that, for encounters, then, they found a way to beat Terrence McKinney. I don't think Duncan's going to do that personally. Duncan, the reason why I'm leaning toward McKinney in this one, Duncan absorbs a lot of damage when he fights. He gets 4 to 5 significant strikes landed against him per minute, and his defense isn't really that good. He also has 2 submission losses on his game. Terrence McKinney has got the jiu-jitsu tools and the grappling to, I think he's just better in that department. On the other hand, Chris Duncan, he's 6-2 in the UFC, good unanimous decision win against Mateusz Rebecki, and he's on a 3-fight winning streak. Good solid striking. He's got lands about 4 significant strikes a minute. And he's good at mixing it up. If the fight needs to go to the ground, he can take it to the ground. He's not super strong on the ground, but he's definitely not afraid to go there either. He's a big decision guy, though. Only 50% of his wins come by KO or TKO. So he's really looking at the high volume, high output. I think basically, does Duncan, if he's going to survive the first round, then kind of the fight's kind of leaning toward his way. But I think Terrence McKinney's got it. I think Terrence McKinney's going to finish the fight in the first round. I think he's got all the tools to beat Chris Duncan. And I think where they stack up in terms of striking and ground, Terrence McKinney's just better in both of those departments. So I'm going to say Terrence McKinney, round 1, KO. Let's keep the train rolling. All right, our last fight on the prelim card is Grant Dawson taking on Manuel Torres in the lightweight division. Grant Dawson is the number 13 ranked guy. He's a minus 235 favorite, while Torres is a plus 180 dog. All right, Grant Dawson is 12-1-1 in the UFC, and he's coming off a unanimous decision win against Diego Ferreira that happened early in January of this year, riding a 3-fight winning streak. Pretty good average, significant strikes landed at around 3, but as we all know, his bread and butter, his core competency is getting opponents to the ground and submitting them. He's got 13 submission wins, and he can control opponents once they get on the ground like nobody's business. He's definitely looking to get cracked into that top 10. He's not the biggest lightweight though. He's 5'10" with only a 72-inch reach advantage. His striking is serviceable, but definitely not his primary, as tool. I think it's more or less to set up for the takedown. But against Manuel Torres, I just think it's only a matter of time. It's inevitable until he gets him to the ground. Torres is 5-1 in the UFC. He's coming off a TKO, pretty good TKO win against a good vet in Drew Dober. Drew Dober, they kind of almost fed him a victory, but he almost fumbled that one. And that happened in March of 2025. Out of his 16 wins, 8 are by KO and 7 are by submissions. Manuel Torres has got some good, he can crack you, dude. He's got, like I said, he's looking for the finish. He definitely pushes the pace, throws volume, and he shows the ability to overwhelm even the most veteran of fighters. On the other hand, he was stopped and run in 2024 in round 1 by Bahamondes. While he has power, he can be vulnerable to heavy hitters. I don't think Grant Dawson is obviously the heaviest of hitters, but Grant Dawson, again, submission. So I think the biggest X factor in this fight is going to be whether, can Torres create chaos in this fight, or whether Dawson can, pretty much implement his grappling game. I think Dawson is going to implement his grappling game way more than Manuel Torres is, seen. So I'm going to go submission round 2 here, Grant Dawson for the win. Hey, everybody, just taking a quick break from the video to say if you like what you're seeing, like what you're hearing, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know how you're doing with the picks in the comment section, and don't forget to share the video. So, again, look forward to seeing and hearing from you in the future, and on to the main card. All right, first fight of the main card, kicking things off, is the number 5 ranked Jan Blachowicz taking on the number 11 ranked Bogdan Guskov. Blachowicz, I don't even know how this works, is a minus 142 favorite, while Bogdan Guskov is the plus 112 underdog. Blachowicz is a 12-8-1 in the UFC, and he's just coming off a unanimous decision loss to Carlos Ulberg that happened in March of 2025. I think he is 1-3-1 in his last 5. He's 42. He's definitely getting to the end of his career. He's really got good size, good reach for the light heavyweight division. He's been in MMA for 20 plus years with 40 fights. There is nothing this dude has not seen that he's not ready for. Definitely very savvy veteran. A feather in his cap, though, even though he lost to Carlos Ulberg, who's supposedly the next one up, he didn't get finished, But again, his skills are just, in my opinion, are just diminishing with time. He isn't the fastest, but he knows how to counter really, really well. He's willingness to throw heavy shots, and he's got legitimate knockout power, which can come at any moment. That's what I really like about him. He looks to set up his shots particularly well. And his fight IQ is really good too. He knows when to pace himself. He knows how to not burn himself out through all 3 rounds, and he can make adjustments mid fights. The problem with MMA/the UFC is, listen, the young eat the old. Bogdan Guskov is one of the hardest hitters in the 205 division, dude. He's 4-1 in the UFC, and he's coming off a pretty solid KO win against Nikita Krylov that happened in July 2025, riding a 4-fight win streak, and 15 out of his 8 wins are coming by KO or TKO. You know what I mean? He's got legit power, dude. I just don't think at 42 years old, Blachowicz can get out of the way of those shots. if he manages to get through the first round, I think it's Blachowicz can, carry the fight to a decision and maybe outpoint him. But Bogdan Guskov only needs that one shot to turn your lights out. Like I said, the biggest X factor for me in this thing is, can Jan survive the first 3 minutes? Or does Guskov detonate one of his hands to turn Blachowicz's lights out? To me, I think Guskov's going to get it done. I think Guskov gets the win either late round 1 or early round 2. But Guskov. Next up in the flyweight division, we have number 2 ranked Brandon Moreno taking on number 5 ranked Tatsuro Taira. Moreno is a plus 110 underdog and Taira is a minus 140 favorite. All right, everybody knows Brandon Moreno. He's 12-5-2 in the UFC, coming off a great unanimous decision win against Steve Erceg that happened in March. He's riding a 2-fight win streak, and he's never been finished. Brandon Moreno's boxing is really solid, really good combinations, and good footwork. He averages, 3 to 4 significant strikes a minute, and his defense is really good which is around 60%. Conversely, Taira's actually got good defense too. It's actually identical. It's 60% as well. Moreno obviously is a former champ. He's got the conditioning and he's got the cardio to push it all 3 rounds and to keep it going. His foot is going to be on the gas pedal. I think that's one of his keys to victories in this. He's got a good submission game. His BJJ is good. I don't think it's on the level of Taira's, but I think it's good enough to possibly avoid some first round submission attempts. His significant strikes, like I said, it's 3. He doesn't really pose a big threat in the TKO department. His big thing is high volume, outpointing you, and, kind of just getting the decision done. His takedowns are average at best, while Taira's his defense is really not that good in terms of takedowns. But that just could be because Taira welcomes opponents to take him to the mat to get the submission. That's where his bread and butter is. Moreno's style leads to wild scrambles, and that's kind of where Taira thrives. So, I think it's Taira's fight to win. Taira, he's 12-5 in the UFC. He's coming off a great submission win against Hung Sung Park that happened in August, and he's never been finished as well. He averages a little less significant strikes than Moreno. He averages about 2 significant strikes a minute. Like I said, he's got good 60% defense. He's got 8 first round finishes in his career. Great submission specialist. This is going to come down, basically, the X factor is the battle for grappling control and finishing opportunity. Does Taira's youth and pace and cardio outweigh Moreno's experience? If Moreno can control the grappling exchanges and avoid getting caught, I think it's Moreno's fight to win. I just think Taira's, he always hunts for submissions, and he's always putting together, chain submissions and just constantly looking for the finish. I think that's going to be too much for Moreno. I think he's going to catch him in a late submission, probably at the 3rd round, but I'm going to say Taira, best case, I would say submission in round 3, worst case decision goes the distance. Next fight we have is going to be the number 10 ranked Henry Cejudo taking on Peyton Talbot in the bantamweight division. Henry Cejudo is a plus 200 dog taking on Peyton Talbot, who is a minus 265 favorite. All right. Henry Cejudo, he's 12-5, coming off a kind of controversial loss to Song Yadong that happened in February, but he's riding a 3-fight lose streak. Henry Cejudo, good thing for him, he's never been submitted. Obviously he's got great wrestling chops. It's Olympic level caliber wrestling. He won the gold medal. He can really, even at 38, he can really dictate the location and the pace of where the fight's going to go. That kind of forces his opponent to solve multiple problems all at once. Like, hey, am I going to go, am I going to try to wrestle or out grapple with him? Or can I stand and, throw down with Henry Cejudo? He's got, moderate to average striking, nothing crazy impressive, but pretty, he can put you down. He's a little smaller, obviously, for the bantamweight division. He's only 5'4" with the 64-inch reach advantage. He's not using his range, obviously, against Peyton Talbot, but, if he sticks to his guns in wrestling, he can definitely get it done. Hani Barcelos took Peyton Talbot, to the mat several times and just dictated the fight to where he wanted to go. He even had some 30-27 rounds against Peyton Talbot. Peyton Talbot is, 5-1 in the UFC. He's coming off a unanimous decision win against Felipe Lima that happened in June of 2025. He largely operates as like a bouncy striker with ability to, flow from orthodox to southpaw. Very high volume outputting when it comes to striking and athletic and creative, real finishing power, real good finishing power. And rangy. He lands about 6 significant strikes with a 54% accuracy. And I really like how he works well behind his jabs and his straight shots. I think, listen, if he is to beat Henry Cejudo, I think he's really got to be on the ball with, defending the takedown and not letting Cejudo dictate the pace. I think his striking is going to be too much for his Cejudo. I think Cejudo is really at the end of his game. I think his striking is kind of diminished. His wrestling is still there, but I just don't think it's going to be enough to get the job done. The X factor for me for this fight, it really comes down to, does Talbot keep it at range and finish, or does Cejudo drag it to the mat and try to clinch and grind out the decision win? If Peyton Talbot can control the distance, he wins. His tools, his reach, his volume, and his youth really give him the clear edge in that department. But again, if Henry Cejudo is able to secure the takedown and get good clinch up against the cage and get the takedowns, I think he can grind out the decision win. I'm taking Peyton Talbot for this one. Goes the distance, Peyton Talbot for the win. All right, for our co-main event, we got Alexandre Pantoja taking on Joshua Van in the flyweight championship bout. Pantoja is minus 265 favorite against Joshua Van, who's a plus 200 underdog. Pantoja is 14-3 in the UFC. He's coming off a pretty easy sub win against Kai Kara-France that happened in the summer in June, riding an 8-fight win streak with 5 title defenses. Now, listen, this is about. Sorry, I was about to sneeze there. Woo! He's got 8 TKO wins, and he's got 8 TKO wins mixed in with a bunch of all of his other submission victories. He isn't beholden just to one dimension. His ability to take his opponent's back and secure the rear naked choke is second to none. It's the elite of the elite, especially in that division. He, like I said, closest to DJ we're ever going to see. He is considered one of the best flyweights of all time. Do I think Joshua Van has the skills to avoid getting taken down? No. I think this is going to be. I think the odds should have been way better, way greater, in my opinion. But hey, it is what it is. Man, he's 8-1 in the UFC. He's coming off a unanimous decision win against Steve Erceg that happened in March. He's riding a 5-fight win streak. He's really a good pressure-based fighter. High volume, pocket boxer. He thrives in the mid-range exchanges. His best performances come when he, basically, forces his opponents to, go in these defensive shells. He likes to draw the counters and fires back with tight combinations, especially like rapid, like 3 to 5 punch combos where, he has a sharp jab and, lead hand feints. Maintains good output, but, again, this is a 5-rounder, so I think his cardio is good enough to maintain all 5 rounds. I just don't think he has the ground game, especially with Pantoja. I think Pantoja is just, he's just head and shoulders above him when it comes to the ground. Don't get me wrong, Joshua Van's a fan favorite. I'm glad, he had a meteoric rise to where he is now, but I just, I think it's going to be submission round 2 maybe. The biggest X factor is, can Joshua Van stay off his back, or can Pantoja, turn this into a scramble heavy grappling fight, which I definitely think he can. So I'm thinking Alexandre Pantoja for the win and still submission round 2. All right. In the main event, we got Merab Dvalishvili taking on Peter Yan. Peter Yan is number 3 ranked in the bantamweight division. Merab Dvalishvili is the minus 500 favorite. Yan is a plus 350 dog. All right, nothing we don't know about Merab is that he's a 14-2 in the UFC. He's coming off of unanimous decision against Corey Sandhagen that happened in October. Riding a 14-fight win streak, and he hasn't lost since 2018. Jesus. Never been KO'd before, and I think it's no secret what he's going to try to do to Peter Yan. He's going to try to dictate the pace, get him against the cage, and get him to the ground and just grind him out. He attempts 5 takedowns per round, which just breaks opponents mentally and physically. Not to mention he's already beat him once. He's a relentless pressure wrestler who just nonstop takedowns. Like I said, forward movement, cardio for years. Forget days, for years. It's not a secret how he wins. It's volume takedowns, draining his opponent's energy and just taking them down to the mat and to prevent strikes. His strongest areas, against obviously in the fence are the underhooks, his body locks, and his chain attempts. Obviously I don't think he has great, KO power or great striking in terms of, significant strikes landed, but he relies on his bread and butter. That's how he's going to get it done. I would say the biggest thing for me from Merab, if I had to point out a weakness, he enters his takedowns in a straight line. He absorbs these clean shots, not often, but enough to all it takes is one knee or one uppercut to send you to sleep. He leaves his chin open during blitzes, and that's his big. That's for against power strikers. That could be a problem. Peter Yan is 11-4 in the UFC. He's coming off a unanimous decision win against Marcus McGee in July 2025, and he's on his 3-fight win streak. Peter Yan is regarded as one of the best technical boxers in the UFC history. He has elite fundamentals, and he's high level defense, and some of the cleanest mid range striking you're ever going to see in MMA. Period. The problem is, obviously it's a championship fight. When he dictates his fight game plan, round one is almost always a throwaway for Peter Yan. He downloads pretty much the data from the fighter, his opponent. Okay, hey, I see that my opponent likes to do this. He likes to come in with this shot or defend with this, but it's often a throwaway, and you're not going to do that against Merab if you're going to eke out a decision. You know what I mean? Your offense has to be to try to take Merab down. That's to get Merab on his back foot. Anyway, as the fight goes on, Yan likes to increase pressure between rounds 2 and 3, and then, kind of take over with volumes in round 4 and 5. He is a master of distance control and probably some of the best body-head combos you're ever going to see. He's never been knocked out before, but like I said, he's a notorious slow starter, and you cannot do that up against Merab if you want to win. The biggest X factor I see here is whether Merab can control, cage positions and chain wrestle, or whether, can Yan stop Merab's rhythm and just kind of keep him at distance and, turn it into a striking fight. We haven't seen Merab really do that. Nurmagomedov almost made him do it, and that was a really tight, a tight-knit fight. But, Nurmagomedov was pushing the pace against Merab, trying to get his, trying to use wrestling against Merab, which is, in my opinion, the best case to beat him. I think Merab is going to, and still, he's going to win this one probably easily via decision. All 5 rounds won by Merab and still. Anyway, that's the end of the fight card. Look forward to seeing you on the next one. And as always, hands up, mics down. See you.